You see, the world has confused loudness with strength. We live in a time where everybody wants to be heard, where noise has become currency and silence is mistaken for weakness. But let me tell you something tonight, real strength doesn't always shout. Real power doesn't need a platform. Sometimes the greatest proof of your maturity and your spiritual growth is your ability to stay silent when everything in you wants to react. It's not that you don't know what to say. It's not that you couldn't clap back. It's not that you didn't catch the disrespect. No, you saw it, you felt it, and you thought about it. But strength said, don't do it. Wisdom said, hold your peace. That's what I came to tell somebody tonight. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. See, when you've been through enough, you start realizing that energy is expensive, and you start being selective about what you respond to. Silence becomes a strategy, not a surrender. You don't owe an explanation when God already gave you a revelation. You don't have to fight battles that he's already promised to win for you. Sometimes the best thing you can do is say nothing, because while you're being silent, God is speaking for you. Some of you have been misunderstood, mistreated, misjudged, but instead of trying to defend yourself, what if you just let the fruit speak? What if you stopped explaining and just kept producing? Because silence doesn't mean absence. Silence means discipline. It means I'm so locked in on my assignment, I don't have time to enter texts. Say, I don't need to prove my value with words. I prove it with consistency, with endurance, with fruit that lasts. That's why some of you have been feeling a pull lately to withdraw from the noise. You're not being antisocial. You're not being cold. You're growing. You're maturing. God is teaching you how to shut your mouth and listen for his voice. He's training you to be quiet long enough to hear what he's really saying. Because his voice isn't in the thunder. It's not in the earthquake. His voice comes in the still small whisper. And you'll miss it if you're too busy arguing with people who don't even have access to your future. Let them talk. Let them speculate. Let them assume. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to show up for every fight. Sometimes the best clapback is your calm. Sometimes your silence screams louder than any word you could ever say. When you stop reacting, you start winning. When you stop speaking just to be heard, you start hearing what matters most. There are blessings attached to your silence. There's favor in your restraint. Some doors are going to open for you simply because you didn't respond. Some miracles are going to manifest because you held your peace. God says, I saw what they did. I heard what they said. But because you didn't lower yourself to their level, I'm about to raise you to another one. You can't walk in divine strength if you're always trying to prove a point. You can't be led by the Spirit if you're always reacting in the flesh. Sometimes you got to be quiet, not because you're afraid, but because you're focused. Because you know your value doesn't need volume. Because you trust that silence is not the absence of power, but the presence of purpose. I dare you to try it this week. The next time somebody tries to pull you into a drama you didn't sign up for, just smile and stay silent. The next time you're tempted to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, just keep walking. The next time your emotions want to lead you, remind yourself that silence is strength, and you've got too much purpose to waste time proving it. You're not being passive, you're being powerful. You're not ignoring the moment, you're mastering it. And when the time comes, God will give you the words. And they'll carry weight because they weren't spoken from impulse, they were spoken from wisdom. Stay silent. Stay strong. Do you ever notice how the loudest moments in your life aren't always the noisiest? Sometimes it's not the sound outside that overwhelms us, it's the noise within. The racing thoughts, the worry, the fear, the anxiety that won't let you rest. You lay your head down at night and the body's tired, but the mind won't quit. And yet it's in that same place right there in the chaos of your inner world that God whispers. Not shouts, not yells, but whispers. Because he doesn't need volume to have authority. His voice is so powerful, so precise, that a whisper can change everything. That's why peace isn't about what's going on around you. It's about what's going on in you. You can be in the middle of a storm and still be calm. You can be surrounded by conflict and still have clarity. That's the kind of peace I'm talking about. Not the kind the world gives, not the kind that depends on everything going right, but the kind that surpasses all understanding. The kind that makes people look at you and say, how are you still standing? How are you not falling apart? And you just smile because you know this peace didn't come from me, this came from God. Some of you right now are in situations that should have broken you. You're carrying weight most people don't even know about. You're walking through stuff that nobody can see, and yet you're still showing up, still pushing, still believing. And it's not because everything is perfect, it's because you found a place of peace inside yourself that doesn't move just because the world does. That's strength. That's power. But let's be real, it's not easy to get there. That kind of peace doesn't come cheap. You don't find that kind of peace scrolling through social media. You don't get that kind of strength arguing with people who don't understand your journey. No, this kind of peace comes in silence, in solitude, in surrender. It comes when you stop trying to fix everything and start trusting the one who holds everything together. It comes when you stop rehearsing the pain and start resting in his presence. Sometimes God will let everything around you shake just to show you that what's in you is unshakable. He'll allow the wind to blow, the waves to rise, not to drown you, but to develop you. Because the only way to know you have peace is to go through something that tries to steal it. And when you make it through and your peace is still intact, you come out with a kind of strength that nobody can take from you. I know some of you are waiting for the situation to change before you rest. You're saying, as soon as this is over, I'll feel better. As soon as they apologize, I'll have peace. As soon as I get the job, the breakthrough, the answer. But what if I told you peace isn't on the other side of the problem? What if I told you it was available right now, right in the middle of the storm, right in the uncertainty, right in the silence? Because peace is not the absence of problems, it's the presence of God. The enemy doesn't want your money, your car, or your house. What he's really after is your peace. Because if he can steal your peace, he can mess with your decisions. If he can disturb your mind, he can distract your spirit. That's why you have to protect your peace like it's a treasure, because it is. It's sacred. And not everybody deserves access to it. Stop letting people who didn't pay the price have access to the peace you had to fight for. Stop letting situations control your inner world. You've come too far to give up your calm every time life throws a curveball. You've grown too much to go back to panic and worry every time things get hard. You've got to learn how to stand still in the storm, to breathe, to listen, to rest in the truth that God is still in control and when you're not. I want to talk to the person who's been battling on the inside, smiling on the outside, but there's a war going on in your mind. Let me tell you, you're not alone. You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're in a place where God is developing something deep within you. He's teaching you how to have peace that doesn't come from people. Peace that doesn't come from performance. Peace that doesn't change with the news or the numbers or the mood swings of life. He's giving you his peace. A peace that holds you steady. A peace that becomes your anchor. And when you get to that place, when you finally realize that real strength isn't in the noise, it's in the stillness, everything changes. You stop chasing things that don't matter. You stop reacting to every little thing. You stop trying to control everything and everyone. And instead you settle into the deep, quiet, unshakable confidence that no matter what's going on around you, God's got you. Stay silent. Stay strong. Out words carry weight. They build, they break, bless, they bind. And too often we throw them around like they don't have power. But they do. Life and death are in the power of the tongue, and every time you open your mouth, you're either speaking life into your future or giving voice to your fear. That's why guarding your words isn't just about having manners, it's about having maturity. It's about protecting your destiny. You don't get to your purpose by talking about it all the time. You get there by moving in silence, by being intentional with what you say, by refusing to waste words on things that don't feed your future. Some of us have forfeited opportunities not because we weren't gifted, but because we weren't disciplined with our mouth. We talked too soon. We shared too much. We reacted too quickly. And the wrong words in the right season can still derail you. That's why silence is such a weapon. Because when you learn to hold your tongue, you're not just keeping peace, you're keeping alignment. You're keeping your heart from going places your feet were never meant to walk. You're keeping your emotions from hijacking your purpose. You're keeping your mind focused on the promise instead of getting lost in the problem. Some of you are in a season where God is asking you to be quiet, not because you don't have anything to say, but because he's building something in you that doesn't need commentary. It needs covering. Everything God is doing in your life doesn't have to be announced. Some things are too sacred to be spoken prematurely. And if you speak too soon, You might invite the wrong voices into a season that requires silence. You've got to know when to speak and when to stay still. And too many of us are responding to critics when we should be listening to God. We're explaining ourselves to people who never cared to understand in the first place. We're trying to correct narratives that don't even matter in the grand scheme of what God is doing. You don't need to explain yourself to everybody. Let your fruit speak. Let your peace speak. Let your endurance speak. Let your silence speak. You know how many battles you can win just by refusing to respond. Not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to see the trap. Because you know that every word you speak carries energy, and you're no longer interested in wasting your strength on foolishness. They want a reaction. They want to pull you into the mud, but you've grown too much to go back and entertain what you've already been delivered from. God is calling you to a new level, and new levels require new language. You can't speak like you used to and expect elevation. You can't curse your future by constantly complaining about your present. You can't keep saying, I'm tired, I'm stuck, I'm stressed, and then wonder why you have no energy to move forward. Your words are shaping your world even when you're not paying attention. What you say in frustration can cancel what God is trying to do in faith. One moment of speaking from pain can cost you peace. One angry outburst can shatter years of growth. So sometimes the strongest thing you can do is just say nothing. Take a breath, pray, pause. Don't let temporary emotions create permanent consequences. We've got to be more careful. You don't have to prove your point in every conversation. You don't have to correct every misunderstanding. You don't have to argue with people who are committed to staying stuck. Protect your mouth, because your mouth is the doorway to your future. Protect your words, because they plant seeds that don't just grow in others, they grow in you. There's a kind of silence that's holy, a silence that keeps your spirit clean, a silence that guards your destiny while you're still becoming. Jesus said very little on the way to the cross. He didn't defend himself, didn't clap back, didn't retaliate. Because when you know who you are, you don't have to explain it. When you know where you're going, you don't have to stop and argue with people who are just passing through your story. And I don't know who needs to hear this, but you're in a season where your silence is speaking louder than your words ever could. The restraint you're showing is strength. The dignity you're holding on to is power. And every time you choose not to respond, not to stoop down, not to fight back with your mouth, you're planting seeds of purpose, peace, and favor in your future. You don't need to talk about it, just be about it. You don't need to explain yourself, just grow. You don't need to announce your next move, just move. Because the strongest voices aren't always the loudest arms. And the most powerful people aren't always the ones talking, they're the ones listening. They're the ones trusting. They're the ones guarding their words like gold, because they know those words carry their future. Stay silent. Stay strong. There's a kind of silence that's sacred, a kind of quiet that doesn't mean defeat, it means endurance. When you're going through pain, when life hits you in ways you didn't see coming, when your heart is heavy and your strength is wearing thin, there's a stillness that settles over your soul, not because you don't feel it, but because you're holding it. Holding the weight, holding the tears, holding the fight, holding your peace, even when everything in you wants to scream. I know what it's like to walk through suffering and feel like you have no words for it. I know what it's like to sit in the silence of your own struggle, to cry in the dark where no one can see you, to smile in public when you're breaking in private. And I know the world doesn't always make room for that kind of pain. People want answers, they want updates, they want explanations, but sometimes there are no words. Sometimes the pain is too deep to describe. Sometimes the wound is too fresh to articulate. And in those moments, silence becomes your sanctuary. Don't let anybody make you feel like you're weak because you're not talking about it. Don't let them rush your healing or demand your story before you're ready to speak it. There is power in suffering silently, not because you're denying it, not because you're numb to it, but because you've learned to take it to the one who understands suffering like no one else. Jesus didn't defend himself on the way to the cross. He didn't plead heed hos. He didn't explain his pain. He stood silent in front of the very people who mocked him, betrayed him, beat him, and still chose to carry the weight of their sin on his shoulders. That silence wasn't weakness. That was strength in its purest form. That was love holding back power. That was purpose carrying pain. And if he could be silent through the cross, you can be silent through your storm. There's a time to speak, yes. But there's also a time to just be, to let the pain do its work, to let the silence become sacred space between you and God. Because some of the most profound healing doesn't happen in the spotlight, it happens in the shadows. In the quiet moments where it's just you, your tears, and God's presence, when no one's watching but heaven is near. See, people think strength is in the performance and how well you hold it together, how strong you look, how steady you sound. But real strength isn't about performance. Real strength is when you're barely hanging on, but you still show up. Real strength is when your heart is shattered, but your faith is intact. Real strength is when you cry and worship at the same time, when you're grieving, but you still trust. When your soul is silent, but your spirit is anchored. Some of you are suffering in silence right now. You're carrying things that nobody knows about. You're fighting battles in your mind, in your body, in your family, and you feel invisible. But can I tell you something? God sees, God knows. God hears the prayers you can't even speak. He understands the groans, the sighs, the silence, and he honors it. You don't have to explain yourself to people who don't understand your pain. You don't owe them a breakdown or a testimony you're not ready to give. Sometimes the only audience you need is God. And the only response you need to give is silence. That silence is sacred. That silence is strong. That silence says, I'm still here. That silence says, I'm not okay, but I'm not giving up. That silence says, I don't have the words, but I know God hears my heart. Some healing happens in the quiet. Some restoration starts when you stop trying to sound strong and just start being real. You don't have to talk your way through everything. You can cry your way through it. You can sit in it. You can walk through it without putting it into words. And even if nobody else understands, God does. He collects every tear. He sees every silent moment. And he's not ignoring your pain. He's working in it. You don't have to rush this part of the process. You don't have to force words you don't have. Let the silence speak. Let it stretch you. Let it shape you. Let it bring you closer to the God who doesn't need noise to move, who doesn't need language to love you, who doesn't need words to work miracles. So if you're suffering in silence, know this: you are not alone. You are not forgotten. Your silence is not wasted. Your pain is not unnoticed. There's glory on the other side of this. And when the time is right, the words will come. The story will be told. But until then, rest in the silence. Embrace the sacred. And hold your strength in stillness. Stay silent. Stay strong. Out there comes a time in your life when you realize that not every battle deserves your attention. Not every attack requires a reaction. Not every critic is worth your energy. And when you truly start walking with God, when you start understanding your identity and your purpose, you stop fighting with people and you start trusting that God will fight for you. You start learning how to stay quiet, not because you're afraid, but because you know you don't have to say a word for the Lord to speak on your behalf. It's a different kind of strength when you step back and say, God, I'm not going to touch this one. It takes maturity to keep your mouth shut when everything in you wants to retaliate. It takes discipline to stay calm while you're being disrespected, misunderstood, or attacked. And I know it feels like silence is surrender, but hear me, it's not. Sometimes silence is surrender to God, not to your enemy. It's you saying, I don't need to fight for myself because I know who's fighting for me. There's a reason Scripture says the Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Stillness is not weakness. Stillness is warfare. Stillness says, I'm not backing down, I'm backing up and letting God handle it. Because the truth is, some of the people you're trying to explain yourself to have already made up their minds about you. Some of the situations you're trying to fix are only distractions meant to pull you out of alignment. And if the enemy can't destroy you, he'll do his best to distract you. If he can't shut you down, he'll try to get you to come down off your level, off your purpose, off your peace. That's why the enemy loves to stir up conflict. He wants to bait you into a fight that isn't even yours to begin with. He wants you to waste time arguing with people who have no power over your destiny. He wants you to get so caught up in defending yourself that you stop depending on the one who defends you better than you ever could. And every time you choose silence over reaction, you're declaring, I trust God more than I trust my emotions. I trust God more than I trust my need to be understood. It's not about letting people walk over you. It's not about being passive. It's about being strategic. It's about knowing that your future is too valuable to be forfeited over a temporary feeling. Because what you say in a moment of frustration can delay what God wants to do in a moment of favor. What you fight in the flesh could cause you to miss what's being worked out in the spirit. That's why God is saying to some of you right now, step back and let me handle it. Stop talking about it. Stop arguing about it. Stop defending yourself. Be still and watch me work. Some of your greatest victories won't come from shouting. They'll come from silence, from trusting, from praying instead of posting, from praising instead of reacting, from releasing instead of retaliating. There are doors that will open for you simply because you chose peace over pettiness. There are blessings that will find you because you stayed quiet and let God speak louder than your pain. You're not weak because you didn't respond. You're not soft because you walked away. You're wise, you're strong. You've grown. You're learning that not every assignment requires your words, some just require your worship. Some just need you to stand still and remember that your silence doesn't mean God is silent. No, while you're holding your peace, he's already arranging the outcome. While you're biting your tongue, he's dispatching angels. While you're praying through clenched teeth, he's moving behind the scenes in ways you can't even see. There's a power that comes when you let go and let God be God. When you say, Lord, I could respond. I could defend myself. I could say exactly what I'm feeling, but I trust you more than I trust me. That's when breakthrough happens. That's when healing happens. That's when peace returns. Not because the situation changed, but because you changed. You shifted from fighting to trusting, from reacting to resting, from anxiety to authority. And let me tell you, when God fights for you, he doesn't just settle the score, he restores what was lost. He redeems the time. He brings beauty from the ashes. He lifts you higher than you ever could have lifted yourself. So don't trade the blessing for a moment of payback. Don't trade your peace for the last word. Don't let your pride cost you your promise. Sometimes the strongest thing you can say is nothing. Let God be your voice. Let him be your defender. Let him handle what your words never could. Stay silent. Stay strong. There comes a moment when silence becomes more than just a response. It becomes a strategy, a way of walking, a sign that you've stepped into a deeper place with God, a place where you're not desperate for attention, not chasing validation, not looking to prove anything to anybody. You've grown past the need to broadcast every step, every thought, every move. Because when you're truly focused on your purpose, you realize that real power doesn't need applause. It doesn't need to be loud to be effective. It just needs to be consistent, steady, and anchored in something greater than public opinion. Some people can't understand your silence because they only know how to measure progress by noise. But you're not moving the way you used to. You're not posting every win. You're not explaining every delay. You've learned that elevation often requires separation and silence. Sometimes God isolates you not to punish you, but to prepare you. And in that quiet place, he begins shaping you, strengthening you, removing distractions and refining your focus. He starts building things in you that don't need to be seen by the world until they're ready. And while you're in that place, it might feel like nothing is happening. You might feel overlooked, like your obedience is going unnoticed, like your sacrifices are invisible. But what you don't see is that silence doesn't mean stillness in the spirit. Heaven is always moving when faith is active. God is working in the background while you're trusting in the silence. He's aligning things. He's orchestrating connections. He's laying the foundation for a future you can't even fully imagine yet. And that's why you can't panic when it's quiet. You can't get discouraged when nobody sees the work you're doing. That's how purpose works. It grows in private before it's revealed in public. Like a seed buried deep in the soil. It's hidden. Yes, but it's also being nurtured. Just because it hasn't broken through the surface doesn't mean it's dead. It means it's developing, rooting, getting strong enough to withstand what's coming next. See, when God gives you a purpose, it's not always flashy. It's not always glamorous. Sometimes it looks like obscurity, like silence, like being behind the scenes, doing the hard things with nobody clapping. But don't confuse the lack of noise with the lack of movement. God is strategic. He hides you to protect you. He covers you so you won't be exposed too soon. He keeps you quiet so your strength has time to grow. And when you've been silent long enough, when you've stopped depending on the noise of others to validate what God said to you, something shifts inside of you. You no longer need a platform to believe in your calling. You no longer need confirmation from people to walk in your assignment. You no longer rely on outward praise to keep you going. You've learned how to feed your own fire. You've learned how to press forward even when no one's watching, no one's clapping, no one's cheering. That's when you know you're maturing, when the applause stops, but the work continues. When when the lights go down, but the purpose stays lit. When people forget you, but you stay faithful. That's not weakness. That's not loneliness. That's preparation. That's the silent shaping of a strong spirit. And let me tell you, God can do more with one person who's faithful in silence than a whole crowd making noise but going nowhere. Some of you are in that silent place right now. You're wondering why it's so quiet, why the breakthrough hasn't come, why the doors haven't opened, why the recognition hasn't followed your obedience. But hear me, just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not on the way. The silence is not a sign that God has forgotten you. It's a sign that he's still building you. And if you stay faithful in the quiet, you'll be ready when the moment comes. You won't have to force it. You won't have to fake it. You won't have to fabricate anything, because you'll know what it took to get there. You'll know what it cost to stay silent, to stay focused, to stay strong. And when the time is right, what you built in silence will speak louder than any words you could ever say. Your fruit will speak. Your peace will speak. Your endurance will speak. And no one will be able to deny what God has done in you and through you. So don't be discouraged if it's quiet right now. Don't lose heart if it feels like you're hidden. Stay faithful, stay rooted, keep moving in silence. Because the loudest victories are often born in the quietest places. Stay silent, stay strong.